Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at Off the Lips. So we're very excited to have Jane here. She is all about social responsibility, taking care of workers, seeing if their conditions are good and if their wages are good. And we love that about you. You could so much just see when Jane came into the green room that she has a heart for people. So we're very excited to have you sharing your story with us today.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Amber. Thank you so much to the Green Room. The space here, as all of you know, is wonderful. So I've been blessed to use the space here and work and go surfing as well. And so, yeah, big shout out. So today we're going to be talking about sort of the work that I'm doing in social responsibility, and then also how surfing has informed that and been such an integral part of my life and career, and hopefully, can inspire, different sort of sectors that you're working in as well. All right. So, the surfing journey for me has taken shape in different places around the world, and I am originally from New York. I grew up in upstate New York, close to the border of Canada. So I started my surfing journey a little bit later in life, but any sort of opportunity that presented itself, I wanted to be at an ocean and get on a surfboard. And I think one of the things about surfing is it's as much about kind of catching the wave and also about learning how to fall as well. And so I have fallen in many places around the world, but I love this sport so much. And J Bay is an incredible place to be and to see world-class surfing. So I've been, blessed to see the surfers here. But kind of like I think surfing is so much like life. I've had, I had an injury along the way, but any opportunity that I could, get to go surfing, I, always sort of jumped on. And I also mentioned too, in different places kind of around the world, I've always been sort of encouraged seeing other women out surfing as well. And so I think that's something that I also feel just passionate about as well. Because I think, the things we learn in the water transcend into life as well. So why J Bay? So I had a dear friend that shared a book with me, and it gave information about Jeffreys Bay. And there's a podcast that mentioned, if there's something that inspires you, to leave it in a room that you're passing through and just to open it. So it could be a quote, a piece of art, something that inspires you. And when I read about Jeffreys Bay, I was so intrigued by the surfers that have come here, the break, and so I was intrigued, and so I kept this book open to Jeffreys Bay, and I would look at it periodically, and it just kept sort of planting the seed, and so I relocated to South Africa in January, and was sort of largely influenced by the desire to go surfing here. So that's a big part of the story of why I'm here at J Bay is, of course, for the surfing. So just a little bit about my background. So my background is in apparel merchandising, and so I went to grad school and I worked. The college that I was in was human ecology, and so the focus is on how do humans relate to their natural environments as well as the physical environments. And so clothing does and is a part of the environments that we navigate, and also the production of apparel does impact the environments that we gather in. And so when I was doing research, I was very intrigued by the book Let My People Go Surfing. And if you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a wonderful book about ethical business. It does touch on surfing, but one of the things that it draws on is the design philosophy of product. And so they ask a lot of different questions when they are looking at how they design new products in their line. And so I was really intrigued by that as kind of a philosophy. And I had the opportunity to work for a summer at their headquarters in Ventura, California. And that experience kind of opened, my sort of eyes to building product that really takes in the environment that they're in, and also the philosophy of incorporating your sport and your passion into and integrating that into your life. And so there is a policy at Patagonia that when there's a swell, you can, as long as you can maintain your work and get it done, you can go surfing, and it's totally acceptable. And so it's kind of just this, philosophy of really kind of, being integrated with the environment, and surfing is such a part of the culture. And so one of the interesting things about Patagonia, they have a very sort of in-depth, they've really kind of assessed the wetsuit and looked at it from many different angles, from the material of the rubber to the repairability. So if there is, a tear, how can they actually repair a wetsuit? And one of the interesting things as well is the factory where their wetsuits are made, as well as 90% of their clothing is in a fair trade certified factory. And when I was at Patagonia, I became kind of exposed to social responsibility. So how do workers earn a fair and decent wage? And they really looked, at their supply chain, both from an environmental, but also from a social responsibility perspective. And so kind of seeing, I was sort of, exposed to that, and, that opened my eyes to how can we kind of inspire, other brands and other retailers to also want to source and design clothing socially, in a social responsible manner. But the sort of, the focal point of the video here is reimagining, wetsuit production. So there's a concept called circularity. So basically when, when a garment reaches the end of its life, what Patagonia is really focused on and looking at is how can, at the end of that life, how can they actually remake it into a wetsuit in the future. So one garment having multiple lives. And so, and also looking at their rubber as well, and where this sort of parlays into kind of the journey that I'm on right now, is their wetsuits are in a fair trade certified factory. And so what does a fair trade certified factory mean? Cool. So fair trade is a global movement focused on putting people and planet first. So there's several different entities, as well as nonprofits and NGOs that work in the fair trade movement space. And so the idea is ensuring that there is equitable trade between consumers as well as producers. And Fair Trade USA is the leading certifier of fair trade products in North America. And we are the first certification organization to have a fair trade certified factory. And so what this ensures is that there's safe working conditions, fair wages. We also take into account environmental protections, and that we have standards in place ensuring transparent supply chains. So the fair trade model, this is sort of like a lot to absorb, but we look at our model as a theory of change. So we take into account the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and so we have adopted 6 of the UN SDGs, and then we look at conscious consumers as well as the communities in which the producers, including factories, farmers, as well as fisheries, and how having standards in place in these communities actually elevates individuals' standards of living. And so this is, again, it's kind of a lot of information here, but the idea is that through these standards we can create change in the world and in supply chains. So how the model operates and sort of works is when a brand partner joins Fair Trade Certified, they pay an additional premium on top of their products that are being bought. And that premium goes directly back to the workers, and the workers decide on how those community development funds are being used. So to date, we have contributed $1 billion to workers globally, and we work with over 1,500 brands and retailers. And then just recently in our factory program, we celebrated 100 million of additional premium to workers. So this number is inclusive of agriculture, fisheries, and our factory program. But we are so excited to celebrate in the factory that we hit 100 million this year. So sustainability. So what is it? What does this mean? So sustainability is something that we see as being on the rise, and one of the key reasons here is conscious consumerism. So consumers, when consumers are asking about products, when consumers are asking, where is my product made? How is it being made? That creates a demand, and brands and retailers listen to that. So, we're seeing, these studies here are, I think I linked them in the back of my deck, but we look at responsible business, risk management, conscious consumerism, and then third-party credibility. So our factory program, for example, uses third-party auditors, and they audit against the standards that we develop. And through that process, that builds credibility in the marketplace. So the factory program is the area that I work in, and we've certified over 160 factories to date. We operate in 22 countries globally, and we service 250,000 workers, and a few brands here you may recognize, but we work with over 70 brand and retail partners. And again, this is right now we're predominantly based in the US. There is a growing increase in Europe particularly, and I am rooting for South Africa. So, so stay tuned. Cool. So this is where we operate currently to date, and where our factories, where the factories that are certified are to date. So the three main components of the program here ensure sort of three areas here. So compliance, community development, funds for workers, and then the consumer engagement. And so the label here, and again, this is in sort of the North America context, but has a very high recognition rate. And so when a consumer sees the product with this label, it's associated with fair wages, safe working conditions, and so we like to think that it's sort of a win-win model for different entities. So since I joined Fairtrade USA in 2021, and so since I joined, we came out with a revised factory production standard. So previously, our standard was called apparel and home goods, and the factory production standard enabled us now to go into more categories. So we are able to certify factories across different commodities. So we now operate in footwear, we work in cosmetics as well. We're looking at electronics at the moment. So we can, operate in different categories. But our standard is very rigorous, and it covers, I would say, these sort of 7 areas here of empowerment, fundamental rights at work, conditions of employment, occupational health and safety, environmental responsibility, transparency and traceability, and internal management system. And so my day-to-day is often in this area here, so in transparency and traceability. So as a requirement of the program, we request that partners submit transactions. So there's traceability of between the producer as well as the brand, and that you can see sort of a clear line of traceability and transactions. So day to day, I do trainings on how to use our reporting systems, how to ensure that you're set up in our systems as well. So this video here talks about our community development fund. And I think this is one of the exciting parts about, or one of my favorite parts about the fair trade movement, is when the workers, after they set up a separate bank account, which community development funds go into, and the workers decide on how those funds are being used. And how do they decide on how those funds are being used? There's a needs assessment that occurs at the site. So the workers will look at the needs of their community. And so they will decide on, what are the needs that we want to address. So there was one, I was reviewing projects, and we have projects that list the number of recipients, and there was typically they match with the size of the community, but there was one time where there was one recipient, but there were thousands of workers at a factory. So I'm thinking, what does this mean? And the workers actually had decided to donate these community development funds to a worker that had lost their leg, and donated a prosthetic leg to that particular worker. And so what this sort of enables is workers to be involved in the people that they work with. And I think there's many well-intentioned companies or individuals, but having the workers decide on that and having the workers being engaged, is something that empowers them, and we hope empowers them to be involved in their local communities as well. And so, as I mentioned, there is a needs assessment that occurs, and we have documentation and process for how to sort of establish these. And then, so we've done a handful of, worker surveys. And so, I think, there's, different ones to pick from, but I picked a few here. But we had at Vertical Knits Factory in Mexico, a worker had said, how much the premium had improved their life. And the projects, these are voted on, by the workers, and so they span many different areas, from donating books to local schools, solar panel as well, tables and cooking supply. This one I think is really unique as well. They've done sewing machine distribution for additional sources of income for workers as well. And so this is, so at one of our factories here, the Fair Trade Society and the factory works for the welfare of the workers. There's been a lot of improvement in our lifestyle since Fair Trade Society was formed in the factory. And so this is, a testimonial of our factories. All right. And thank you.
Wow, Jane. I think I speak on behalf of everyone who witnessed that. I feel very inspired, even a little bit emotional. It definitely gives me a lot of hope for the future, for sure. So thank you so much for the work that you do. We will be taking questions, and I have this really fun microphone, so if you have a question, I'm going to pass it to you. Any questions? That was really lovely.
How long does the process generally take from, if I'm understanding correctly, for a factory to go through the whole process to getting certified from beginning to end usually?
Yeah, so great question. So it can range based on the geography that it's in. We would say, ballpark, 3 to 6 months, ballpark. And then if there are non-compliances, for example, at that factory, we have a field team that will work on a continuous improvement plan to address what those non-compliances are. And then every year there is also an annual audit at the factory as well.
Oh, yeah. So, that's cool. Shorter than I thought.
Yeah.
What effort would it take to establish this in a country like South Africa?
So, wonderful question. And we have one tea producer, Rooibos tea, in the northern. And unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to prepare that, but we do operate and have one producer here. And I think the short answer is consumers wanting, asking the question, creating the demand. We, as fair trade, are sort of the middle people, between the factory or a farm, and the entities as the brand holder. We sort of sit between them, but I think consumers wanting that would be, I think, the biggest driver.
A follow-up. So how do you spur end users on to see that implementation happen?
Yeah. The communities that where farms are, as well as factories, their wages are monitored. So there's that is part of the process. So I think workers knowing that there is an agency that is working to have oversight of their wages, that the workers feel empowered about this program, that the workers have agency as well to be involved in this process. There's other certifications in the space. I'll use, but I think one of the unique things about fair trade is the engagement that workers have. So there's a committee that's formed at each farm, at each factory, and so the workers the workers do vote. They are the ones that are kind of identifying what their needs are, and so I think the short answer would be consumers and the worker engagement and having oversight, in the communities.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if I completely understand correctly. So fair trade comes in to, say, a factory, for example, and let's say the factory, so they approach fair trade comes in, and let's say the factory is non-compliant. Would you then, it's not like a penalty system, it's more of like a we'll help you correct these things?
Yeah, so we use third-party auditors to audit the factory. And so if there is a non-compliance that's found, what we will do as our role is our field managers will work with the factory. And so they will work with the factory management to and develop a plan to close that non-compliance. And so we facilitate that, and we have people that are on the ground from Fair Trade that support. But the workers, the factory management, are very involved in the process and are, aware of what the non-compliances are. And what I will say as well is having engaged brand partners that are sourcing in a factory as well also kind of creates transparency. And so we have brands that want to also encourage the factory to close those non-compliances. And so we have brands that want to elevate the standards at that factory too.
And then,
Did
sorry,
that-
and
did
that was
answer-
was
did
beautiful.
that-
I maybe want to clarify even further.
Yeah.
Is oh goodness. Excuse me, I forgot now. Yes, Jane is still here to Sunday. And we're definitely happy to have everybody stick around and ask some more questions or just have some chats.
Sounds
But does anyone else have any last questions?
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
If
so
I remember the
much.
question.
Thank you.
Thank you.